Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another interview on the JayBee and Milly channel. I am JayBee and of course with me is Milly.
Hi.
We have Dan Farrell.
Hi.
And joining us as the special guest who will be interviewing today is Daniel Altiere. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Of course, we're going to talk about a lot of really cool things, noticeably Scooby Doo The Mystery Begins and also Scooby Doo Curse of the Lake Monster. So we're really looking forward to getting into them. But to build up a timeline of your career, I'd like to ask what started you on the path to become a writer?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, probably from high school on. I always wanted to be a novel writer, sort of a proper novelist. And then my brother took me to see Miller's Crossing, the Coen brothers film. And I was just kind of struck with the bug to write movies. And then I attended Ithaca College, which is the communications department there is kind of like a vortex. If you have any type of creative ability or maybe even look okay on camera, you kind of get sucked in to the department. You get sucked into people's film projects. I started by acting in a few silly ones. And then I started producing, sort of co-producing, associate producing some movies for students. And then finally, someone who became a very, very good friend for life asked me to produce his movie with him, but then he and I wound up writing it as well together. We collaborated on the writing as well. It was a comedy that went on to win the Best Student Award, Best Student Film. So that was a lot of fun. So I think from that point on, I always then that was my new goal, to be a screenwriter. My brother attended Syracuse University, so he wasn't too far. So I would go up and visit him, and we never really discussed it. But when I graduated, I wrote 4 or 5 scripts with a friend from college. He and I were collaborators for a while. And Stephen was writing scripts on his own. And my mother sort of said, why are you guys, wasting your time doing all this stuff on your own? Kind of knocked our heads together, and we decided to start collaborating together. And we wrote, I don't know, combined with my own scripts and his own scripts, I think we wrote a total of about 8 screenplays before we sold our first one.
Well, this certainly is a career that we're very excited to get into more. And as you were saying at the start there, you knew from an early age that you wanted to write. Was there a certain writer that, you think really inspired you to know that that was the path for you?
Well, I became sort of semi-obsessed with Hemingway, based strictly on a memoir by a man named A.E. Hotchner, who spent probably the last 10 years of his life with Hemingway, and kind of was appointed by Hemingway sort of as a kind of an unofficial biographer. I think Hemingway kind of adopted him as that, and they became good friends, and Hotchner accompanied him on travels and hunts and fishing expeditions, and then wrote this really, really lovely account of the man's life. And that kind of got me hooked. Then I read probably every other biography, and his life really intrigued me. And of course, when I started reading his books, then I was truly, truly hooked. So I started out wanting to be, like I said, sort of a serious and proper novelist. And when I graduated college, I sort of followed that pathway that many writers follow, and then I was hired by a small weekly newspaper down the Jersey Shore right out of school, and stayed with them for about a year and a half. And then they fired me, they said, because they said they were kicking me out of the nest because they said I was getting too comfortable and that I was meant for bigger things. So they fired me for my own good. And I moved to New York City and started working for HBO.com. And then went on to FoxNews.com before it became far-right propaganda wing of the Republican Party. It was at the very onset of the internet movement, of websites and everything like that. So every company was trying to get a web presence. And all through those years, through my HBO years and my Fox News years, that's when I was writing screenplays with first my college collaborative partner, and then Stephen and I started to do it together. And the first screenplay we sold was actually something that my college collaborative partner and I, this was a different partner than the film that won the award. He and I wrote something called Meddlers, which we used to drive around New York City in my '76 Camaro with the theme songs to old '70s cop shows playing. And I said, this is what we should write. This is exactly what we should write. And so we wrote something called Meddlers with two 20-something guys who think they're Starsky and Hutch meddling with the law. And Stephen, my brother, read it and said, this is really fascinating, but your story is a complete disaster. And Stephen's strong suit has always been structure and story. So he kind of came in and rewrote it with us. And once he and I, my brother and I, moved to Los Angeles, that became the first screenplay we sold. We sold it about 6-8 weeks after we moved out there, which of course we thought, wow, this is easy. Hollywood is easy to break into. And then naturally we didn't work for the next 6 months of our career until we started getting more jobs after that.
Yeah, it's always fascinating.
That was the start of my career. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's okay, go on.
That was the start of my career, I should say. That's how I got into writing and got to Hollywood.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to see how your career progresses. And I know you've mentioned your brother and that it was your friend who suggested you become a writing duo. I mean, obviously we know some of your earlier credits. You did the gym teacher movie with your brother. But what was it like sort of going from being a solo writer to sort of writing with your brother? Did it go easy, or did you have a similar writing style?
It was very easy. It was very natural. He wrote probably 4 or 5 screenplays, a romantic comedy, and I don't even remember what the other ones were. But the romantic comedy actually was one that we collaborated on, called 3 Little Words, about a man who every single woman he says, I love you to, just dies. So he becomes someone who's terrified of love. That was the romantic comedy conceit, which we wrote together. And I think we even got a studio executive interested in it, and he put us through some, of course, free rewrites, since we were sort of nobody writers, and that didn't go anywhere. But no, we mind melded, I guess you could say, very quickly. And yeah, just communications wise, the way we were able to each take our certain roles, and just enjoyed it from a very, very early period of writing together. We instantly worked well together.
That's so fascinating to hear that you blended together in that way. And I know you mentioned that Stephen's strong suit was always that structure and that side of things. What were the aspects that you feel that you were very helpful and very instrumental in contributing to in that dynamic? I
was better with dialogue and scene work, I'd say. I was Stephen was very good at joke writing, but I was good at joke writing as well. I think I was able to make our dialogue a little bit more realistic, and I was good with scene structure. Stephen was good with, we were almost equally, we always thought that Stephen was better with ideas, with concepts, but then when we sort of one day went through all the screenplays that we had sold, it was pretty much 50-50 of who came up with the idea of what eventually sold. So yeah, like I said, so my strong suit, we just complemented one another in that way. He was always excellent at structure.
That really makes a lot of sense, especially considering, some of the things that we're going to get onto with Scooby Doo, because I still remember watching stuff like The Mystery Begins and Curse of the Lake Monster for the first time.
Speaking of Mystery Begins.
Oh,
wow.
That's amazing. Where was that from?
For every production, the cast would give the crew a gift of T-shirts. And this was for the first movie, The Mystery Begins, and the second one I don't think I have anymore. But the second one was kind of a funny take, because I don't know if part of the production of working with a CGI character is you have these great big balls One of them is the texture of an actual, like if Scooby Doo was alive. One of them was a mirror. And so the shirts for the second, and they would always call out balls every product, whenever they needed the balls for the shot, they'd call out balls. So the second t-shirts that the cast made the crew were Scooby Doo, Curse of Lake Monster, and on the back it just said balls.
Oh wow, that's amazing. See, I was anticipating quite a lot from this interview, but a balls t-shirt definitely wasn't on there. But it's amazing to hear about that because, like I was saying, like it's just really like a core memory watching those movies for the first time, and even now going back to revisit them is amazing. And so I'm curious to know, before going into that process of writing the movies, how familiar were you with the Scooby-Doo franchise?
I wasn't as much as my brother. I mean, I'm certain I watched them, but my brother knew them. He knew that Velma had to lose her glasses. He knew Fred had to say, let's split up and search for clues. And I think the third thing was just working Scooby Snacks into it some way. I think that was the third thing, but the glasses were like the most fun to write. I always just, it still makes me laugh whenever Velma would say, my glasses, and her glasses would just fly off her face. I don't know, that still amuses me. And, thinking of a creative way to work that into the story. So I'd say Stephen was certainly more familiar with the series than I was, and the kind of tropes, the Scooby-Doo tropes that you have to work into every movie.
Well, he was certainly right. That certainly is pretty much the perfect Scooby formula. And do you remember how your work on the Scooby-Doo movies came about?
Sure. We were, I don't remember what the sequence was, but we were pretty much live action writers. And I don't know, again, if this is before and after, but then we had a 2-year contract with Disney Animation. And so that sort of gave us animation cred. And I'm not sure if Scooby was before or after the Disney animation contract, but our manager had a good relationship. Our manager got us every single project. We had a manager, an agent, and a lawyer. And the manager was responsible for every one of our jobs. The agent would just swoop in at the end and do the negotiations. But our manager got us a meeting with the executive at Warner Brothers direct to DVD. I can't remember his name, but he was a really, really great guy. And the way every Hollywood job like this, whether it be an assignment that you get or a rewrite, but mostly, I guess what I'm talking about is assignments. You come up with an entire take. They say they want to make an origin story for Scooby-Doo. So you go in with, they probably go to 5 different writers, and you pitch your take. You write out. We used to write out basically a script, and we each had a paragraph, and we would memorize it, of course, and then we'd go in and pitch it. And I guess they liked our pitch the best, so we got the job. And then when I think Brian Levant at first, when we met Brian Levant, Steven says that Brian Levant didn't like us very much at first, and I don't remember that at all. But then when we went out to his ranch, he's got this big, beautiful ranch. He was a huge A-list director for a while. So we started working together, and then we all started getting along great. So that's how we got the job. We just pitched along with a bunch of other writers. And like I said, I suppose they liked our take the best. Our take was, Breakfast Club. They all needed attention.
That's amazing. And I know that you're saying, like you say, they really liked your take. Was there a certain character that you either, particularly enjoyed writing for, or that you were most excited to, focus in on and see them develop?
Well, Scooby and Shaggy, I think, are always the most fun, easily the most fun. There's just so many moments between them that you can, the double entendres with Scooby's speech impediment, I guess you could say, and easily the most fun writing for them because they just give you the most opportunities for comedy. Fred doesn't necessarily give you comedy. None of the other characters they're all pretty much straight men. So Scooby and Shaggy were easily the most fun to write.
Yeah. And did you know at the time of writing, did you know who would be playing any of the characters?
Not at all. Nope, not until the screenplay was written by us, and then we went into rewrites with Brian Levant, and then we did a really fun process, which was called a round table, I think they was, where Brian Levant called two of his old writing friends. You know, Brian Levant was, I mean, he started on Happy Days, and so he had these other two writers from that age who, you know, were basically retired, and everyone would read the script and punch it up in their own way. You just add jokes. Any place you could see a joke, and then you'd come in and have this round. They'd pay you a certain amount of money, and you come in and have this round table meeting with all five of us, I guess it was, and you just go page by page, and whoever had a joke would pitch it, and some were rejected and some were immediately embraced, and that was just the final kind of punch up. And it wasn't until after that, and then I guess I'm sure a month went by until they started then casting it.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, it sounds amazing, all the process, but once you'd actually finished with the writing, were you ever on location for the filming?
We were on location more so for, well, we were there the first movie. Yeah, we were there when they go to when they sneak into the principal's house. I think when all of the things come to life. I think that's what the scene was, when all of the airplanes, these collectible airplanes and stuff come to life. We were there for that. And we were there for some of the, we were definitely there for some of Curse of the Lake Monster, because I remember being on set with Jonathan Winters, who didn't make the final cut, unfortunately, but I forget the character's name, but the character's name was actually the character's same name in Scooby Doo cartoon, in one of the Scooby Doo cartoon episodes, and it was voiced by Jonathan Winters. And then we wrote the same exact character in the movie, who was played by Jonathan Winters. So it was this really wonderful tribute to get him involved. And then his scene got cut, unfortunately. But I remember being on set, and he was just a remarkable man. He was sort of like a Robin Williams, who he would just stand there and just sort of do a stream of consciousness comedy, and everyone would just crowd around him enthralled. And I remember another time when Marion Ross, who was the mother from Happy Days, you know, again, since Brian Levant had been in the business for 30 years or whatever he was able to get all these people involved. And Marion Ross was sitting there one day, and she was very intently reading the script. And we came up and introduced herself, and she said, I really want to get this all perfectly right. It's really important to me. And we were just so blown away that she would take our little Scooby Doo script and be just so dramatically serious about it. It was a real honor.
See, that's so interesting about like Jonathan Winters as well. I think that was like when it was Old Man Frickert and his
Yes,
barn.
exactly.
I'd love to see that scene somewhere, because to this day
Yeah,
it's never
so
been
would
seen
we.
on anything. It's crazy.
Yeah, so would we. I'd love to see if that celluloid is preserved somewhere.
But yeah, like maybe for one of like the special anniversaries, you know, fingers crossed they do something like that. But I'd
Yeah.
like to ask, because there just seems to be a lot of ideas in the process and so many cool things that should have been or would have been discussed. So, for instance, there was that first pitch that you mentioned, and then the round table. At any point on that process, was there anything that sticks out to you that was discussed and maybe even written up, but ultimately it didn't go forward for one reason or another?
No, the round table, half the jokes, I'm sure, didn't make it. But I don't remember any, and when we collaborated with Brian Levant after we wrote I should say first draft, but it was, of course, probably our sixth draft, because we write so many drafts just on our own. But I'm sure a lot changed with our rewrite with Brian Levant. I'm certain quite a bit must have changed, just because he was a writer as well, and he had so much experience with what works and what doesn't work. And he was writing with actually making the movie in mind, so thinking about what's possible and what's not possible and what would translate to the screen the best.
Yeah, it all does definitely come across that way, especially with some of the things that we've seen from some on-set photos and things that have been shared with us. So one of those things that I was quite curious about was I really I don't know the technical name for this, and I really should, but it's one of those snap things that you do to signify the start and end of a cut. And I
Oh,
saw
the
one of them,
slate. I think it's
oh, the
called the
slate,
slate.
yeah, that's it, that's
Yeah.
and on it said Scooby Doo in the beginning. So was that like a working title, or was
That
that
was the
something
title I
else?
think Brian Levant wanted. And between you and us, I'm so grateful that the mystery begins, because I think it's really the perfect title for the origin story of Scooby Doo.
Yeah, and I love that it's an origin as well. Expanding on that, was it an origin of any particular iteration? So, for instance, the original series, the 2002 live actions, or was it just we're going to retell the Mystery Inc. story and this happens to just be the beginning of it?
Well, perhaps egotistically, we considered it the origin story of every single
Mm.
other Scooby animation or Scooby movie, because it had never really been told, as far as we know. I mean, you guys might know that it had been told before, but according to what we knew, the origin story, maybe it was after, maybe, and I'm saying you guys might know that it actually was told before, but since we didn't know of any other telling of it, it was really a great honor to be able to tell that origin story of how this, I don't know what it was then, 30-year-old canon, to how the gang got together.
It certainly was an origin story that we definitely all wanted to see, and it was honestly incredible. I know it's even now one of the ones that we go back to watch the most. And I know we were speaking briefly about kind of how things have changed in the process, and like you say, from kind of the title to the rewrites and things. One of the scenes that Brian Levant did mention was in regards to the mystery machine. He said there was a mystery machine scene that had to be cut out for budget reasons. Do you remember kind of from your time on set or anything like that where you had to be involved with any quick rewrites or things like that, or anything else that had to be changed in the recording process?
No, on other movies, like on our what was it, Dr. Dolittle movie, we went up to Canada and were on set for that. And I remember there were some on-set rewrites for that, but I don't remember any specific on-set rewrites. I think that more often than those, things were filmed that then had to be cut, like the Jonathan Winters scene. I don't know if the scene you're talking about was something that they shot and had to be cut, or was just rewritten on set. But no, I don't.
Yeah.
We didn't have any input when it came to rewrites, and there didn't seem to be any rewrites. At least when we were there, there was no on-set rewrites required.
Yeah, I don't think he said that it was shot. I think it was just meant to be that gap, in the scene that you mentioned where they break into the principal's house. I think it was, instead of being like passed out and waking up in the school, it would have been a mystery machine chasing to the school, but that wasn't
Oh,
viable
there
with the
was a
budget.
big chase. There was a big mystery machine chase. I don't know who was chasing the mystery machine. That's wow, you're bringing back memories for me now. I don't know who was chasing the mystery machine. Did he mention who was chasing the mystery machine?
I don't believe he did. I can only assume it was the two ghosts, the
Right,
Prufrock ghosts,
right.
but
They're
I'm
probably
not sure.
flying through the air chasing us. I do remember that, and it was a very action-packed chase scene. And in retrospect, it was really wishful thinking to think we could get something like that for that kind of budget. But I do remember that. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. And can I ask, do you have any particular memories that are your favorite from working on the Mystery Begins? Anything in particular that stands out to you from your time on the movie or anything?
Just like I said, the honor of writing it, how we got Scooby to Shaggy, him, not being adopted yet again, sort of that sad scene, and then he gets knocked off the truck, and then we jumps in, keeps saying roasts, and Shaggy says, "What's so scary about a good roast?" Very proud of like little things like that. Like I said, of taking Scooby Doo lines and having them mean something else and being able to create a joke out of that. So, and just really proud of the use of, even though it's a we certainly borrowed it from the Breakfast Club. We thought that was a great way to get them together. And I don't know if it was Brian Levant's idea or our idea. I think it might have been his, but they all sit down for detention and they all take out books, and everyone except for Shaggy just happens to be reading a mystery. And I thought that they really nailed it then to just plant that seed that they all had a little bit of interest in mysteries, even at that point.
Yeah, oh, it was definitely an origin story that worked for me. And as we've mentioned, you also wrote Curse of the Lake Monster, which personally is one of my favorite Scooby-Doo films ever. So how soon after writing The Mystery Begins did you know that there'd be a sequel?
Well, we all had delusions of grandeur when it came to The Mystery Begins. We thought that we could try to get that theatrically released somehow, and that would be like a higher level executive decision. And of course, like I said, it was a delusion because you need some known talent. You can't take a bunch of unknowns and have a theatrical release. You'll just never be able to market it effectively enough. You'll never get anybody there. Unlike, getting Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr. So I don't remember when we knew there was going to be a sequel. I know it was the most successful show ratings wise on Cartoon Network at the time. So I assume that's why they said, well, we definitely can justify a sequel, but I don't remember how long after that it was.
I think even now they're like both Mystery Begins and Curse of the Lake Monster were still like 1 and 2. And like there's some Ben 10 movies at the bottom there, but yeah, I still think they're like at the top. And it is interesting because I almost do wonder if it would almost be viable to theatrically release it now, because I know that Nick Pilatus and Kate Melton are so active in the community, but also Robbie Amell and Haley Kiyoko, they've gone on to do some really cool things. I think now, hopefully for an anniversary, we'll like coerce our local cinema to like release it or something. that'll be fun.
Yeah, Robbie and Haley really they really used that as a launch pad. They really did well for themselves.
Yeah, oh, they definitely did. And then just in terms of Curse of the Lake Monster, the writing process, obviously it takes place in the summer. Was that always the plan, or we know it was actually released in October? So did the studio want it to be Halloween themed instead?
I don't know. I think it was all right. No one ever thought about a Halloween theme. I think it was our idea to go summer jobs. And it might have been an idea. I don't want to take anything away from Brian Levant because he might have had input on the actual concept as well. It might have even been his idea. I don't really remember, and I definitely don't want to take anything away from him if it was his idea. But I think we all kind of agreed that it should be summer break and to use kind of a relationship of Daphne's to bring them to a resort like that.
But I do like that a lot because it's a really good summer movie. I think it's definitely one that we always stick on. Just the vibes and all aspects of it is absolutely incredible. Was there a particular aspect of that Lake Monster movie that you enjoyed writing the most?
Well, the mystery itself was a lot of fun. And I really, really like how we handled the just touching on the crushes that they had on one another. The Scooby falling for Daphne, and then the sort of romantic antagonism between Fred and Daphne. It was really important for us to reset those relationships at the end of the movie, so they didn't bleed. So in the next movie or the next animated series, you didn't have to continue a romance between Fred and Daphne, or you didn't have to have Shaggy and Velma in some sort of relationship. And we played a little bit with romance in the third movie, which unfortunately never got made, but it wasn't between any of the gang.
Yeah, I think I remember reading some of that. I think what we had was it Velma and H.G. Wells? That sounded like it was going to be
exactly. Oh, you got your hands on the
incredible.
script?
Yeah, and I read it and I
Oh,
was like,
wonderful.
I wish we could have seen this because that would have been absolutely incredible, and definitely it'd be cool to touch upon that a bit later because it's always cool to dig into those curiosities about what we didn't see. But in terms of what we did see, is there any particular aspect of either the first or second movie, like a memory that you had making it, writing it, that stands out to you the most?
Well, we really enjoyed working with Brian. I think it was probably I always refer to the films as the most fun I've ever had as a screenwriter. And my brother and I really got along very well, and it was a really good time in our career in that we we were in a project that we knew was probably going to be made, that was almost definitely going to be made, because oftentimes in Hollywood you're doing a rewrite on a project or something you sold, and it just never gets made. Just the percentage of films that get developed compared to the percentage of films that get made, it's just chances are very, very much against getting made. And this one seemed from the very beginning that because it was direct to DVD, direct to TV, it was more of a business thing. They had a slot that they knew they were going to do. They knew this was a piece of business that they were going to make, so that was fun. The roundtables were always a blast because the two old guys who we maintained a relationship with, we would get together with lunch for them with them every couple months. The roundtables were always a blast, but just like I said, in general, the whole process from writing the scripts between my brother and I, and then the rewrite process with Brian Levant, everything was just kind of blessed, to be kind of corny about it, but that's how it felt. They really were all just, everything went perfectly throughout the entire process.
I mean, it's fair to say these certainly were two fantastic movies. And of course, as we were starting to touch on there, when we spoke with Brian Levant, he did say that there would have been a third movie and that it was going to be set in Victorian London at Christmas. Do you know where that idea came from and kind of what the origin was of that idea?
I don't, but I think it might have been Brian's idea to do steampunk, to have the, quote unquote ghost to be steampunk. It might have been his idea to do Christmas as well. I don't remember. I think the H.G. Wells Museum might have been our idea, and the romance between Velma and a young H.G. Wells might have been our idea. It's so hard to tell now because I think that was probably a bit more of a collaborative process. We might have been collaborating with Brian from the very beginning on that. I mean, we would collaborate, we'd have meetings, and then Stephen and I would still go away and write it together without Brian. But I think there was probably a little bit more direct involvement by Brian by that time. And he had a really crazy name for it that I can't even remember, like the Scooby Doo something Christmas Spectacular. I don't know.
Yeah,
You
it's like
might
the
have a couple
Christmas
of pages.
Spectacular and Laugh-O-Rama or something
Yeah,
like
something
that.
just insane that would never make it. There was no way it would be called that. But it was just Brian. That was just Brian.
And I guess, again, this is a question that you might not know, but with the Curse of the Lake Monster been set in the summer and then the following movie would have been the Christmas, do you know if it was to kind of, with the intention of being within the same year, or would there have been a bit of a time jump between the two?
I don't know. I don't know when they would have taken place. What the sort of timeline would have been between the movies. I don't think it mattered because we wouldn't have referred to them in any sequence. I don't think we would have referred to them at all, probably in the third one. We would have referred to the first two or anything that happened in the first two. I don't think they would have said, remember when we dated, or remember when, anything like
Yeah.
that. I think all that stuff was just kind of reset.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And obviously, one aspect of that film was the ending, and it sort of alluded to opening up a multiverse. Obviously, that's quite trendy now. Do you think it would have led to more sequels afterwards?
Well, we were sort of, and this sort of was part of our career trajectory as well. Most of our work And it was, I considered a very successful career for the decade that we worked, but so much of our work, 75% of it maybe was direct to DVD and direct to TV. And that business model was kind of coming to an end. That wave was crashing, and then it took about maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years for the streaming wave to catch on. So towards when we stopped working together, my brother and I, we didn't have our next project set up, and we were in a really sort of unstable position because, like I said, these movies were just not being made anymore. The movies that were at our level, we did have that one theatrical movie, Norm of the North, which is a whole different crazy story. But basically everything else, even when we worked for Disney Animation, everything else would have been direct to DVD.
Yeah, so in terms of the
But
third
they
Scooby
did want to
film,
make a series, though. I don't know if Brian ever mentioned that. They wanted to make a live action series. At least Brian very much wanted to make a live action series, but they budgeted them out, and they were going to be $1 million an episode, and there was no way Warner Brothers was going to make that kind of investment. But a live action series would have just been so cool, just unlike anything that had ever been done before with Scooby Gang.
yeah, that is something I think people still want to do, but which we haven't got, unfortunately. But yeah, so in terms of the third film, it eventually didn't happen. Is it just because of what you said, just they weren't getting made, or did maybe the script, was it over budgeted maybe?
I think they felt they had just run their course, and it was a piece of business they couldn't justify. Whether they ran the numbers and thought we can't make the money on this, or I don't think it was the budget of the movie, because they would have had us go back to the drawing board. If it was a piece of business they definitely wanted to execute, they would have had to just go back to the drawing board, or even hired other writers. I doubt they would have done that, but they would have had us go back to the drawing board and come up with something cheaper. So I think it was just feeling that maybe direct to DVD, direct to TV was cresting a little bit, or live action Scooby Doo's were cresting a little bit. I'm not quite sure what it was, but like I said, these movies they consider them pieces of business. So somehow it wasn't creative. Somehow it was business wise, they couldn't justify it.
Well, it would have been cool to see that, even now if they decided to resurrect that somehow in like comic form or however they would do things. But it'd be cool to see the Scooby Gang in the UK, because that's not something that often happens. So just from our personal bias point of view, that would have been absolutely incredible to see as well. But I suppose moving on to the future and the present, is there anything that you're currently working on, or any personal projects that you can talk about at all?
No, my brother and I stopped working together when I said things got a little bit shaky towards the end, when the direct-to-DVD and direct-to-TV market started to dry up. And then my wife had this opportunity, or really this mandate, to transfer to Austin, Texas. And it was sort of one of those things: do we rely on what had become a kind of wobbly screenwriting career, or do we rely on a corporate career? And when it came to stability, the corporate career kind of won out. And it's really very, very challenging unless you're very established. Like if we were A-listers, it would have been a different thing altogether. But it's very, very challenging to maintain a screenwriting career when you don't live in Los Angeles.
Yeah, we've definitely heard
Now
a few stories
to tell you the
about
truth,
that.
I started about 3 or 4 years ago. I started writing books. And I started with kids' books, middle grade books, and then I went on to a YA book, and now I'm writing an adult police procedural. I've got a great agent, but I just haven't been able to get any traction with any of the books yet.
Well, we're actually really, really interested to like keep up with that at all, if that ever comes into fruition, which would actually be amazing to see. So for people watching this that are looking to keep up with that, is there any place that's viable online to like keep up with your work at all?
No, I have a WordPress, but I haven't maintained it at all. I was thinking of self-publishing one of the books that I wrote, the YA book, but I really deeply researched self-publishing, and the real challenge is marketing. you know, anybody could self-publish a book, but then getting it out there, getting in front of people to know that it even exists is nearly, well, it's just a lot of responsibility. It's a huge learning curve, and you've got to do it all yourself. And there's dozens of companies that say they will self-publish your book and then take care of all the marketing. And in my experience, they were almost all scams. They were almost all companies that preyed on writers with dreams, and they would charge quite a bit of money. And then, you know, I won't do anything unless I'm going to see a return. This is not a vanity project for me. I don't want to just get a book published just so I could say I have a book published. I don't want to put $10,000 up to make $2,000.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. But we know personally that we'll be looking out to seeing what happens next, because we'll definitely be sure to support all of that. It's just absolutely incredible. But yeah, that does conclude all the questions that we had for you today. Just thank you so much again for coming on and for sharing all of your stories about your career, because it's been an absolute pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. And of course, thank the people watching, because we really do appreciate all the support recently. So thank you so much. You can find all of our social links in the description down below. If you do want to see more, then please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.